John, it is an honor to speak with you. I have been going through your books and your profile, your resume. Awesome. Thank you for your service. It sounds like you've had a ton of fun along the way. And I'm even wearing the Air Force hat right now. So
Ah, ah.
I got to say, I want to believe too, man. I'm looking at your poster. I want to believe. I got into this in hopes of finding solid evidence and data that we're not alone. And, it's been a mixed bag. I've talked to people that are absolutely genuine. They've had experiences that will blow your mind that they can't explain, I can't explain. And then I've talked to people that are not so much. So just to say that. So, like, clearly you went from a very tight knit community and to get into the paranormal aspects of things. I find that fascinating. I know a lot of people in the military that are the same, but like, what got you into that? Why did you start researching UFOs and ETs so much with your position in the military? Real quick, check out these statistics. Gold, it's gone up about 81% the past 5 years. The past 12 months, almost 20%. Central banks are ditching the US dollar and US treasuries and purchasing gold by the tons. Now, there's obviously never any guarantees, so you follow what the money funders are doing, what the MFers are doing. So, what's the good news? Well, many predict gold is just getting started. The UBS even said it was going to go up to $5,000. Now, that's pretty awesome news if you ask me. Noble Gold Investments, their phones are ringing off the hook. It appears that everybody wants to protect their retirement with gold and silver right now. You can do the same. Noble Gold Investments can help you secure some gold to protect your future. From day one, you will work with a dedicated all-American expert. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced investor, Noble Gold Investments will make sure you get all the help that you need. This month, Noble Gold Investments will give you a free 1/4 ounce solid gold coin to add to your collection if you open up an account with Noble Gold Investments. Find out how to qualify. Their number is 1-877-646-5347. Go to leakprojectgold.com, get the free ebooks, let them know Rex from Leak Project sent you, and check out noblegoldinvestments.com. Now is a better time than ever to convert your 401 or IRA, unless it was last week or last month. Give them a call. You'll be glad you did. Now let's get back to the presentation.
Okay, so
And tell
it
us a little bit
started
about
before.
yourself.
Yeah, I I have to say it started before. It started when I was a little kid. I've always been open to a greater reality, I guess you could say. Um, I had seen things from a young age. I mean, for example, I do remember when I was 5 years old, I saw demons in my bedroom and terrified me. And I remember asking my brother, what was that word that pastor said one time when we were in church with grandma and to make the demons go away? I used to think the word was rebuke, right? That rebuke was like a magic word that you could yell at a demon to make it go away. And because I could not remember that word when I saw those things in the room. And um, so I had seen that dark side of the reality with my own eyes at a very young age, and I knew that there was something there. And I attended church with my great grandmother, and for the most part, kind of tuned out, playing with whatever on the pew there next to her or whatever when I was a little kid. Uh, but I probably got more out of the Bible from my great grandmother, just like reading me and my brother stories about Daniel and Goliath, David and Goliath, and Daniel in the lion's den and stuff like that. So I had that little taste of Christianity from my great grandparents because they were both firm believers. They were missionaries. Well, I wouldn't say missionaries, they were ministers, a minister team during the Great Depression. And for many years, they traveled the whole United States preaching the gospel. And they did the big tent revivals and all of that. So they were all about Jesus, Pentecostal, the tongues, miracles, that kind of thing. And grandma had some supernatural encounters herself in her life. And I would have never doubted my great grandmother. Um, for example, she said an angel saved her life once. Um, she was choking from carbon monoxide poisoning, asked God for help. Her bedroom door opened. Some guy walked into her room, grabbed her, rolled her over, and she could breathe again. And all that carbon monoxide was flushed out of the room. He turned around and walked out. The interesting thing about him is she said he was a military type soldier. He was wearing a kind of military uniform and he had a helmet with a spike on the top, like a pickle hob helmet. So interesting description there. But he was like seemed to be like a flesh and blood person, just walked into her room and rolled her over. She jumped out of bed and ran into the living room, and the front door was locked with a chain across it. And she had no idea how he got in. So she was like, well, that was an angel. Um, he looked like this. He didn't have wings. But I prayed to God and he walked in and saved me. So she was very convinced that he was an angel. Grandma also had another experience. So when she was in her 60s, she almost died of a stroke. And she was in a hospital, paralyzed on the left side of her body. She couldn't talk. And the doctors were like, not sure if she would even walk again. It was so serious, it almost killed her. And while she was there in the hospital, she said Jesus himself walked into her hospital room and that he was like glowing and just amazing. And he looked at her and he smiled and he turned around and walked out. And when he smiled at her, the left side of her body came back and she could talk and everything like nothing ever happened. So she had a miraculous healing at that time. She told everybody about it, and I'm sure her church heard all about it. She was in a ministry team in the church, prayed for people all the time and stuff. And I'm sure on this occasion, probably the whole church was praying for her, and this is what happened. So I heard these stories and stuff, and I had this kind of connection with another, spiritual side of reality, but I also saw demons myself. So I had seen both sides of the spectrum on this at a very young age, like 5 years old.
Let me ask a quick question about that. What did the demons look like?
Okay, so these demons, it's ridiculous. These didn't have horns or anything. They looked like they were about 2.5 feet long or so. Imagine a person with a sheet over their head with black holes cut and then this frowning mouth. No real kind of definition of a nose, but just this frowning mouth and these sort of dark eyes that go down. And it was like this transparent greenish color, the whole thing. So, and they were kind of semi-transparent, and they were like this glowy greenish color. And it started out, I saw 4 or 5 of them. I woke up, I was asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw these things just floating around the room, just kind of dodging all over the place. And when I noticed them, I was like, what is that? Um, they became aware that I was awake, and then they started rushing into my face like this and doing these little diving down into my face just to get up into my face and scare me. And they emitted like a supernatural fear. And as soon as they noticed me, more and more started to flood the room, and there was like 30 or 40 of them. The room was just totally infested with these things flying all over the place. I tried to get out of the bed. I tried to scream. My brother was on the other side of the room asleep. When I opened my mouth, I couldn't, like, all that came out was just very lightest whisper. I couldn't, my vocal cords were disabled. I tried to move. They were paralyzing me. I couldn't move. And I stayed awake for like the next 3 hours, terrified. And every time I opened my eyes, they were still there. And then it would flood up into my face. And I just kept periodically cracking my eyes open to see if they were still there. And they just would not go away for hours. And I was terrified the whole night. Well, for several hours that night until the first rays of dawn popped through the window, and then they started disappearing after that. And once the sunlight was up, they were gone. And then I was able to I was released from my paralysis and able to get up. But I know I wasn't dreaming because I was awake the whole time, trying to get up and fighting the paralysis the whole time for about 3 hours or so. So that was horrible. And I had seen other things over the years, but because of this, my sister had this, kind of unusual fascination with the paranormal, and she tried messing around with a Ouija board with a friend once, and the pointer flew across the room and slammed against the door, and she freaked and screamed and ran out of there. But she was always the daredevil wanting to, hey, let's go into the back room and see if Grandpa's ghost is back there, and see if we could talk to him or make something happen. Um, so we had different experiences with my sister as well. And my sister has this insane experience when she lived on an island in the middle of the Mississippi River. Um, and this is kind of lore of my family, right? And my great grandmother, going back to her, people understood like hearing a story from her, like about seeing an angel or encountering Jesus. This is kind of expected for a person that spends their life in ministry. Um, but I do remember when I was 5 years old, this was back in 1975. There was a family gathering at her house, so it was either Christmas or Thanksgiving. And Grandma was reading a newspaper while there were all these animated conversations going around in the living room. And Grandma suddenly raised her hand and said, "Okay, everybody be quiet. I have an announcement to make to the whole family." And this is kind of unusual. Um, so everybody was quiet. And then Grandma read this article in the newspaper. It was about a UFO that had come down into Madera County, and it was a wild goose chase between the police and this UFO all over the countryside. So the following year, of course, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, and that opening scene in the movie where there's a UFO and the cops are chasing it all over the place. The scene she read in this newspaper matched that scene in the movie exactly. But Grandma's story was a year before Close Encounters of the Third Kind was produced. So we had never heard of this story, right? And me being only 5 years old, I'm kind of like, what's this all about, And after Grandma reads the story, I notice I'm seeing people's faces and they're kind of like puzzled, right? Why is Grandma reading this story? And she lowered the paper and said, "When I was a little girl, me and my sister saw a UFO." And so she starts telling a story about how she saw this, what do you call it, um, cigar-shaped UFO that was above the plains of Kentucky. They lived out in the middle of nowhere. And they had never even seen a vehicle before. They had a wagon pulled by horses. So they had no frame of reference for what they were looking at. And this thing flew by right in front of them so close that they even saw the guy inside. It was a transparent bubble on the top. He turned his head and looked at him as he flew by. And then he went over these bluffs and then zipped off into the upper atmosphere and disappeared in the blink of an eye. They were shocked and they went back. They told their mom. Their mom told them never to tell anybody that story ever again. And, don't argue with mom, just shut it. And a couple of years after that, Grandma's sister died. So she had this story to herself. And I guess reading this newspaper some 70 years later, uh, it all came rushing back and she just had to get it off of her chest. Hey, you know what? I saw that and those things are real. I don't care what people think. And
What year would that have been in? Do you know?
oh, probably like around 1910, something like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
Grandma was a little kid. My great grandmother was a little kid.
Did did she say
Uh,
what the guy looked like or the pilot?
no, unfortunately, I was only 5 years old, so I was still just processing this story and like not thinking of questions like was he, what kind of a humanoid was he bald? Did he have hair? Was he uh, human looking or different looking? Was the head unusually sized? Anything like that. But no, she just said we saw the guy inside and he turned and looked at us when he flew by. So they were close enough to see a humanoid type head turn and look at him. look at them as he flew by. And so I was pumping my mom with questions about, on the way home. And we used to watch Star Trek. So that was an easy tie-in. Mom just said, well, Star Trek, right? That's probably a lot more real than what most people think. I mean, look at space, the stars. And of course, I did a little more research on that. I believe Hubble's telescope last estimate that I looked at was 70 septillion stars. And then each star, one or more planets. So more than 70 septillion, you're getting around decillion. We don't have a number for that. That's a seven with 22 zeros after it. Um, if you were to take a single grain of sand off the beach and then ask yourself, how many would 70 septillion be? More than the planet is 70 septillion. Probably more than our entire solar system would be 70 septillion grains of sand. That's how vast our cosmos is, incomprehensibly vast. So to suggest that this is the only planet with life on it, in my opinion, takes more faith to believe in that than to believe that there's life out there somewhere. And I honestly think that um, I believe that in extraterrestrial life even more now because of the Bible rather than in spite of it. Um, which is kind of weird because, I mean, I looked at Christianity Today, an article yesterday, what they say about ET life, and they like stay right up front. The Bible doesn't say one way or another if there's life in the heavens, when it literally states it with terms like the host of heaven. That term, the host of heaven, is mentioned 18 times in the Bible. Host meaning large number of life forms. Heaven is a plural word in the Bible, and it has three definitions if you look it up in Strong's Enhanced Lexicon, which gives you the Hebrew and the Greek and the different translations. Shamim in Hebrew is a plural word. In most instances in the Bible, it's used 657 times, and in most instances, it refers to the abode of the sun and the moon and the stars. And it's first defined in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. So the word heaven is a huge misnomer because we say it all the time. We associate up with going to heaven. And when angels come down to earth, they come from the sky. So first heaven is the sky immediately surrounding the earth. Second heaven is outer space. Third heaven is where God's throne is, which is in outer space. So all three heavens are associated with up. Digging deeper into the Bible and also adding in some quantum theory in terms of what we understand of our reality now. Our universe is multidimensional. It's layers of existence. Atomic particles, they vibrate at different frequencies. And if you were to change your atomic vibrational frequency, you would pop out of this dimension, but you would either go into a higher dimension or a lower dimension. But you would still be composed of a physical atomical, structure. Your atoms are multidimensional themselves. So it's the nature of our universe and the nature of matter and energy and the way that we understand it now with quantum physics. We're getting to the point where we can comprehend things that we call spiritual in a theological context, but that doesn't mean non-physical. It shouldn't be confused with being non-physical. A lot of Christians think of spiritual as just purely non-physical and nothing to do with this reality, but that's actually not true. It's not biblically accurate. Heaven, the highest heaven, is God's throne. And Bible actually literally associates a physical location with God's throne as being in the direction of north. When Satan led his attack into God's kingdom, he left from the earth. He ascended above the clouds into the second heaven and headed toward God's throne in the sides of the north. That's in Isaiah 14. So, and the book of Psalms in Psalm 75, and in another area, it says that heaven is associated with north, the direction of north. So it's in the northern hemisphere. God has a planet out there. It's a glorified planet. If we were to travel there, we might not perceive his realm because we're in our dimension. But if we were to travel there and then increase our dimensional frequency, then we would see this glorified planet with cities and rivers and trees and everything that the Bible describes it with. Heaven is described as a physical planet. It has clouds. There's lightning and stuff. It has all these physical objects. It has a city. It has people, animals, trees, a river. It couldn't have mountains and all of these things if it's not a planet. So the highest heaven is a planet where God's throne is. Second heaven is outer space, the heavens, it's plural. A lot of planets out there are glorified planets. So they're in a higher dimension, and some planets are of a lower glory, so they're in a lower dimension. Every planet is multidimensional. And what I mean by that is we live in a layered existence. I have a graphic that I can show kind of depicting this. Let's see if I can share my screen and just kind of explain it. So you see here is second heaven, outer space, right? And then Earth is right here. We're middle Earth, right? Just imagine this is our planet. Hell is in the heart of the Earth in a lower dimension. It's a smaller planet. Really crappy place. A lot of fire, torment. The beings that live there are not nice. It used to have a part in it that was nice, called Abraham's bosom, and also the place of the righteous dead. But after Jesus died on the cross, it says that he actually went down there and he released those captives. So it was in a place that wasn't torment, but they were still stuck there. And then there's this outer layer where in a higher dimension, Earth is a bigger planet, about, I estimate, 272 times bigger. And I base that on the size of the city that's going to be transported to Earth in the future. In the book of Revelation, it says after the Battle of Armageddon and after all this stuff happens, God is going to relocate his capital of the universe called New Jerusalem, where it's currently at, and he's going to relocate it to Earth. And the city, the dimensions are given. It's 1,500 miles long, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles high. Earth is not big enough to accommodate a city that's 1,500 miles high. Mount Everest is 5 miles high. This is 1,500 miles high.
That's a good point.
Earth is massive in this higher dimension. And the entire universe itself is probably expanded out and much larger. Multiverse, I should call it. And these are the three scriptures that talk about the location of this New Jerusalem right now. And it's in the sides of the north. Promotion comes from the north, from God. And in Isaiah, far reaches of the north. This is where God's throne is. It's a glorified planet with a physical city. If it wasn't physical, you couldn't transport that city to Earth in the future. So I'm seeing all of these cool issues here in the Bible that, because I'm studying and I'm in school, and at the same time, I'm reading the Bible, and I also had this like encyclopedic knowledge of paranormal things in my head. And like I told you, when I was a little kid, I was asking my mom, and she told me, well, there's probably life out there just like Star Trek. So my enjoyment of that show and others like it increased over time. And I really got into wanting to know more and more about unknown things. My mom, she actually got this encyclopedic set, World Life or something like that. I forget what it was. I actually have it written down here, but It was an encyclopedia of the paranormal. And I read all these books from cover to cover, right? And from when I was a little kid. Um, so like at 10 years old, I could tell you about psychometry and retro recognition, perceiving into the past, advanced concepts of like, um, is it a ghost you're seeing or are you replaying a recording? And it's like stuck in the atmosphere. Cursed objects and, all kinds of different paranormal things. Um, so I was always kind of that way and very interested into that. And I wasn't raised in a Christian home. So like my great grandmother and my great grandfather, they were very much believers. Um, but my mom was this hippie type, you know. She would say she believed in God and stuff. She had a respect for Jesus. Um, but as far as like understanding the gospel and all of that and really wrapping her head around all of that, um, not so much. And my dad, he was more like he would just joke about being a pagan and stuff. So he was mostly agnostic. Um, so it's kind of like the 60s came and then that fundamental, that Christian Bible Belt heritage that passed on somewhat to my grandmother, Ruth. And then in the 60s came and then my dad and my mom were just kind of like, no, well, we're going to kind of do our own thing. We're not going to go to church or do that kind of thing. So a lot of people did that back then and breaking away from traditional norms and stuff. And society radically changed in the 60s and had been progressively changing ever since. Um, so I was raised in my mom's house. She was just open-minded and free-thinking about everything. And then she saw how interested I was in the paranormal. So she got this series of books and stuff and like, just, maybe you'll read and it'll be healthy for you to read. And so I'm reading about all this stuff, and later it turned into experimentation and ghost hunting and attempting to astral project and channel spirits and all kinds of things that I experimented with, Ouija boards and stuff. And um, then I went into the army, and probably the one of the more profound experiences I had was in the jungle. So I was active duty Army, M60 gunner, and then they had the Panamanian conflict broke out, and they deployed me to Panama during the conflict. And we were guarding the perimeter at Fort Sherman, and as a jungle out there, they literally have their own zoo based on the animals that they caught around the base. They didn't need a fence around this base because it was jungle, and you'd be insane to go through that jungle. I mean, we did land navigation, but you could only go like maybe 100 meters or so, because there were areas where, you would see like 50, 60 yards of like a patch, a meadow of moving ground. And it would be like an inch to 2 inches thick of ants just carpeting the ground. You can't walk through there. You wouldn't dream of walking through that. And you would, honestly, you'd have to run. You don't know if there's a pit somewhere in there. Vegetation would sometimes blanket the ground, and there would be these pits, and you wouldn't see it until you were falling in it. And then they also have pit vipers, a type of snake that likes to inhabit those areas. So you would literally be falling into a pit full of deadly snakes. They had bushmaster snakes that would chase you. Uh, Everything in that jungle wanted to hurt you or kill you. The plants, a lot of the plants had toxins in them. So if you just lean against a plant or walk through the brush and some of the leaves brush against your skin, you're suddenly itching like crazy, breaking out. Or some plants, they had a plant that would burn you. You just brush it against your skin and your arm is burning. Um, so, and then thorns everywhere. And then these insects were like prehistoric, very inhospitable place. Um, but they put us to guard the perimeter of this. base by stationing us throughout this jungle around the back end of this base. And they also have otherworldly things in that jungle because I saw this glowing ball of light that was flashing on and off intermittently. And it was apparently very interested in our location and what the heck we were doing out there because it made a beeline straight for my area where I was at with my team leader. And and when it reached us, it stopped. It was about 30 feet up in the trees, and it was the size of a soccer ball. I have my night vision, and I'm looking through these night vision goggles, and when it's not flashing, it's completely invisible. It's not making any noise. It's like it's not there. But it would flash on like a blink about once every 30 seconds. And I'm just like totally captivated by this thing because I'm like going through my Rolodex, like, it's not swamp gas. That's not ball lightning. What is that? Closest I got was maybe a will-o'-the-wisp from playing Dungeons and Dragons with some friends. I knew all of the creatures and stuff in the books, and which is based on lore, and it kind of ties into my cryptid research that I've done. So um, a lot of those creatures in the Dungeons and Dragons books come from like cryptid legends and stuff, and then also ancient legends. But will-o'-the-wisp is, I believe, a legend that comes from the Druids over in the United Kingdom, ancient England area. But apparently, there's a version of that that was in Panama because it was acting exactly like that thing, trying to evoke my curiosity. Uh, but it just seemed to me kind of like it was curious. And of course, in the army, my paranormal proclivities um, didn't earn me any favors. They used to make fun of me a lot, tease me a lot. Um, I had nicknames and stuff because of my interest in the paranormal. Um, and the guy who was the leader of the pack, tormenting and mocking me all the time, he happened to be with me on this guard duty night, with this ball of light. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Now he's on my turf. And so I wake him up and I say, it's time for your shift. By the way, there's this glowing ball of light over here. And he thinks that I'm joking and he starts cussing me out until the thing flashes. And I said, I'm not kidding. Uh, there's really something here and it's transdimensional because you can't see it through night vision. You can't hear it, but it's there. And I know nothing of any sort in a biology textbook that describes something that looks like a ball of light, size of a soccer ball, that you can't see unless it's flashing on. I mean, it more or less resembles a physical phenomenon like ball lightning, but it's not acting like ball lightning.
That's what I was thinking. Ball lightning. I saw a
Yeah.
video the other day where this ball lightning went across a railroad track, and the way that it did it, I'm just like, that is so bizarre. Is that really just ball lightning? And it probably really was just ball lightning, but it looked like it was supernatural. It was amazing.
Yes. Um, there might be some instances of ball lightning that aren't just ball lightning, but ball lightning doesn't flash on and off. It doesn't blink. Ball lightning just, it's like a perpetual ball of light and it zips around and then it hits something and dissipates. It's electricity. It's not blink over here, blink over here, blink over there. Um, it when it shows up, it's erratic and it's sort of zipping around. I've seen they can create ball lightning in a lab, these little tiny balls of light, and it bounces around on a plate and then it hits something and dissipates. Really interesting. But this was not acting like that at all. And I had an M60 on and 750 rounds of ammo. This thing's not, it actually stopped instead of coming to me and hitting the weapon. I also had a radio with a 6-foot whip antenna that kind of was like a lightning rod, and the backpack it was in had several spare large lithium batteries. None of this stuff was attracting it. I took off my M60 though, just in case. I didn't want to, press my luck. Um, my team leader was freaking out, and I'm like, what? I can't shoot it, it's a ball of light. Um, and I don't know where it's gonna pop up next, initially anyway. Um, he was freaking out and he was trying to kind of speculate. He's like, maybe it's a laser from the aircraft carrier. And I'm like, laser requires a straight line of sight, and this thing is down in the trees. You see what it's doing. This thing is also acting like it's sentient. It came straight here to our position and then it stopped and it's parked right there. And it's observing us. And I said to him at that point, I'm going to try to talk to it. And he's yelling at me no, and I'm like, there's no way I'm passing this up. Um, this is first contact in my book, I mean, I get to be James T. Kirk here. So I go out into a little bit of a clearing there next to my position, and I introduce myself. I tell it that, despite the weapons and stuff, I have disarmed myself and I come in peace. I have nothing against it. I am just wanting to know more about what this thing is, and, can you please reveal yourself to me? Um, I'm here trying to understand you. And it stopped blinking at that point, kind of like it was processing. And I suddenly had this feeling come over me, um, like a presence. And it's that feeling of being watched, but more so because it was transmitting to me with such intensity that I felt exactly where it was located. I could feel its presence as if I were looking at it. And then I felt it moving toward me. And it was really intimidating because this presence was extremely powerful. And I was kind of somewhat regretting that I initiated contact. So I was starting to get afraid, like, oh crap, it's moving, it's moving toward me. And I took a couple of steps backward, and the corporal was watching me, and he was kind of distancing himself from me. He didn't want to be any part of this. Like, I told you not to. I told you not to, dumbass. And but I tried to calm myself down, and I lifted the goggles up, and I said, I feel it moving. I don't know how I feel it. I don't know how I know where it's at, but I do know where it's at. And I moved the goggles up. The thing flew right over my head. I felt it, and it's like the hair on my head just kind of, I felt like a tingly, like staticky feeling, right? This thing was extremely powerful. And it flew right over the top of my head. I did a 180, and I was completely looking in the opposite direction. And I said, the next time it flashes, it's going to flash right there. When I pointed and said the word there, it flashed exactly where I pointed. So it was kind of letting me know I sort of understand what you're saying. In a way, I think that that's what it was kind of conveying to me. Plus, it was transmitting to me its location telepathically. And I don't know how it did it. It wasn't a normal language. It wasn't a normal communication like talking. It didn't do anything like totally over the top, transform into a person and, hey, let's sit down and have an MRE together. Nothing crazy like that. It let me know that I am here. I'm alive, I'm curious about you or whatever. And it transmitted to me its location. And it was moving around, and I could literally feel it moving like it was attached to me somehow. It continued after it was behind us, then it did a full 360 sweep of our location, flashing, and it did a complete circle around our perimeter, almost like it wanted to get a look at us from every side. And then it proceeded off down the jungle, and we had two other positions in the jungle, and it did the same thing with both of them. And then off it went back into the jungle. So according to the legend of Will-O-the-Wisp, these things are supposed to evoke your curiosity and try to get you to follow them. And then if you do, you fall into a pit or you die or something. It's not known to be a good creature from legend. However, in my opinion, this thing just seemed more like a curious animal, the behavior, the way, it just showed up. But I honestly, to this day, I have no idea. It could have been an alien probe or something for all I know, with some sort of sentience attached to it.
Could have been a
Um,
Russian probe, man.
Whatever it was capable of transmitting to me its location telepathically. That's pretty advanced.
That is
Um,
really cool. And it could also be just an ancient Earth being of some
oh,
kind.
an elemental, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're one of the more common encounters for people who do ghost hunting or paranormal stuff or whatever. The orb is like probably top of the list. There's a few things that people have seen or experienced a lot, or captured on videos. You see orbs on video a lot and stuff like that. But this thing was incredibly powerful because when it flashed on, it had the brightness and intensity of a camera flash. I mean, if you were looking at it, you were blinded. Uh, I suspect it was illuminating the jungle possibly as much as maybe a half a mile out. Uh, the guys at the other position might have seen it from our position. They were hundreds of yards away.
So
But
what is your commanding officer? Sorry to interrupt. I'm just thinking like your commanding officer, you said, right? Is the skeptic. You wake up and
no, he
now
was my team leader,
team leader.
and
Okay. So what's he doing
that's
now?
even more puzzling. Um, so the next day I brought it up because nobody was saying anything, and I waited for the other two teams to come in, and you know, um, we all coalesced into one area, and we were getting our stuff ready to go back into the base. And I'm like wondering if anybody's going to say anything. Like, why is no one saying anything, right? So I finally opened my mouth, let's address the elephant in the room. Did any of you guys see that thing that came around our perimeter last night? Corporal Stinger, you saw it. You saw me try to communicate with it. You saw what happened. You saw how it flashed when I pointed and said it was where it was going to flash. And he's just looking at me. And and then I said to the other guys, I said, "Did you see something?" And then one of the guys from the other site, I said, "Were you on guard duty leading up to right before midnight?" Because that was around the time this thing came up. And he's like, "Oh, I think I saw something like, it's like maybe a firefly or something." I'm like, "Dude, firefly? We've been seeing fireflies every night when we're here. This was the size of a soccer ball and it lit up the whole jungle. Firefly doesn't do that, and you know it." He's like, "Well, yeah, I kind of saw something, I think." And another guy is like, "Yeah, I seem to remember something." I'm like, "Well, if you had to be asleep on duty if you didn't." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, they weren't talking about it. They did say that they saw something, but they didn't want to give any details." And and I said, "Well, I talked to the darn thing and I felt it moving around. It somehow, and should we report it? I mean, what do you think? I mean, what the heck was that?" And my team leader spoke up and he said, "I know exactly what it was." And I'm like, "What? You know, what did you hear?" And he says, "That was something in the jungle and it came here because you summoned it." And then they started joking like I'm a wizard and that I was casting spells and all this stupid stuff. And because I played Dungeons and Dragons too. So then it turned into a roast, right? And they're all just creating these new jokes and then belittling me and mocking me even more and more and more. And I'm like, "But it's real. I mean, you guys saw it. I mean, how can you joke about this?" And they just kept joking. And then I couldn't really say anything about it because just that would just invite more ridicule, right? So I was like, they didn't want to report it. And I'm not going to go over anybody's head to try to report something like that because um, I was already considered the weirdo. So if anybody's going to report a UFO, okay, fine. A UFO or an entity or something, it would be me to do it. And then they would all make fun of me and, ridicule me about it. And I'm like, "Nah, I'm not going to go there." So that kind of ended there in terms of, trying to see what we were going to do about it. Nobody was interested to report anything.
They were concerned about getting ridiculed, it sounds like.
Oh, probably, they have no problem dishing it out, but nobody wants to have that to themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Huh.
so anyway,
Wow.
yeah, after the army, um, I went into this downward kind of spiral myself, into the party life and stuff. I went into college and um, I guess it was during one of the lowest times of my life, though I wasn't really aware of it, but things were kind of spiraling out of control. And I remember one night I had a dream that um, it changed me. I mean, I literally, it was like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? Where he goes to bed and he's encountering these beings that are showing them his life and different things going on in his life and giving him these different perspectives. And then he wakes up and he is like so radically different the next day. Everybody that sees him is like shocked and is like, who is this dude? I had a dream like that. Um,
Wow. John is talking about stuff that is next level, and you want to listen to this in full over on our Patreon page. John gets into several other topics of discussion that, okay, so let me just give you some examples here. How would you like to know about a massive underground base in Antarctica? How would you like to know more about trans-dimensional beings? How about cryptids in El Salvador? Wait until you hear about what an army sniper friend of his saw in Iraq, similar to what's talked about and what was documented about the giants in the caves in Afghanistan.